And I think we reached a good number, so we can just start. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the EnGendering Data webinar series. My name is Arago. I'm Senior Program Manager at IFPRI, based in Washington, D.C., and also the Program Manager for the Methods and Metrics sub-area of work under the CGIAR Gender Accelerator. For those joining us for the first time, EnGendering Data is a community for sharing resources and discussing innovative tools and methods for gender research in food, land, and water systems. Throughout the year, we host blogs and webinars to facilitate these conversations. I will drop a link to our blog series in the chat shortly, or one of my colleagues could do that while I'm speaking. So yeah, today's webinar is titled The Gendered Preference of Work Flexibility, Rethinking Time-Income Trade-Offs with Evidence from Rural Rwanda. And we'll be joined by two speakers. The first speaker here is Dr. Johanna Muller-Strom. She's a professor of economics at the Interdisciplinary Center for Economic Science and the Economics Department at George Mason University. Her research focuses on behavioral, experimental, and public economics. And we have Dr. Brenda Bunabana. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Geography and the Environment of the University of Texas at Austin. Her expertise is in feminist theory, gender responsive research methods, as well as participatory and qualitative methodologies. Just for your information, this Rwanda project was initially supported by the Gender Accelerator, previously the Gender Platform, a couple of years ago, and it was led by Berber Kramer at IFPRI. And we are really excited to have the team join us today and share the qualitative results from the project. And before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So today's webinar, as you can see, is being recorded now. The recording will be available in the Teams chat afterward. And if you'd like to ask a question, type it in the chat anytime or raise your hand during the Q&A. And please keep your microphone muted during the presentation. I guess with that, I'll hand it over to our first presenter to kick us off. Over to you, Johanna.
Thank you so much. Super glad to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. I will go ahead and share slides. So everyone can see that all right?
Yes, please go ahead.
Awesome. Yes. So it's not two different presentations, right? It's me and Brenda, and we're presenting the same project. But given that this is really multi-methods work. So we've been doing both qualitative and quantitative work within this project. It's very fitting, I think, that we're presenting two of us, namely Brenda, who knows much more about qualitative methods than I do, and then me, who normally work more on quantitative stuff. So I'm a professor at the Econ department at George Mason, and I'm interested in gender from a lot of different perspectives. I have relatively limited experience working in the global south, but this project that I've been conducting with Brenda and Berber and others have really been eye-opening and fantastic in so many ways. So super glad to be here. So this will focus on preferences for work flexibility, and we will bring evidence from Rwanda, which will lead us to partly rethink time-income trade-offs, at least compared to how we see women and men handling these in high-income countries. So just as a background, we are all on the team interested in gender differences in economic preferences and behavior in lots of different ways. I have been working primarily on this from the economic perspective, where we tend to focus on things like risk aversion, confidence, and competitiveness. And in all those areas, there are well-documented gender differences. But a lot of that research comes, or at least when it started, it came from research conducted with college students at primarily US and maybe European institutions. There is still a lot we need to learn there. And when we look at the research from low and middle income countries, we also know quite a lot about some of the gender differences, but a lot of the focus there has been more on gender differences in outcomes, whereas we know less about what preferences and behaviors underlie it. So, for example, if we go to IFPRI's area with food and food production and so on, there are, for example, contexts where men's plots are more productive than women's plots, but it's unclear what preferences and behaviors underlie that. So the economic preferences is where I'm coming from, and then of course there is lots of very relevant research in other fields, sociology, psychology, about gender differences in personality traits and in morals and ethics and so on. But we're building on all of this and trying to understand one particular behavior better, that is workload and management of workload, and also management of control over income within this project. So we want to know how gender shapes preference for work flexibility, and in this project we're also looking at income and control over income. We will talk a little bit about that, but we have that written up in a separate paper. So this is really this exciting multi-methods work is really focused on the work flexibility, and when I think about this, I come from it again from the economics angle, and a few years ago Claudia Goldin won the Nobel Prize in economics. She's one of the leading gender economists, and she is one of those who have been talking a lot about flexibility and the value of flexibility. And she has been studying this in high-income countries and found that women in high-income countries demand more flexibility in their work than men do. So, for example, women demand or want the flexibility to, for example, leave early to take care of a child who is sick, who needs to be picked up, or have flexibility to be able to attend the school play or things like that. And what she finds in her research is that women in high-income countries, they demand this flexibility, and they also get it to some extent, but they get it at the price. And she finds that this can partly explain the remaining gender wage gap, so that women are paying through lower wages for this flexibility. So we were wondering, okay, how does this look in a low mid income setting? And therefore, we wanted to study this in a lab in the field experiment in Rwanda. So we're in this experiment. We're assessing both whether and this is where the qualitative part comes in and becomes so excited, why women may or may not place a higher value than men on flexibility and time-saving opportunities in this particular context. So that's what we're doing here. And if anyone has clarifying questions, I know we have quite some time for Q&A later on. But if are any clarifying questions, please feel free to just interrupt me and ask. So when we were thinking about whether or not we should expect the same patterns in terms of demand for flexibility in a setting like Rwanda, as we see in high-income countries, there are primarily two interesting perspectives to take. So one perspective that one can take is what is called the social role hypothesis. And this would mean that, okay, there is just a difference between men and women in how in their kind of innate preference for how much flexibility they want. And this is something that we're basically always going to see. And if anything, we're going to see it more in a low income context than in a high income context, because in a high income context, other roles come in and play a role too, with growing opportunities for earning money and so on. So here, if we build on the social role hypothesis, if we see a demand for flexibility in high income countries, we should expect to see that demand in low and mid income contexts as well. The resource hypothesis says something very differently. So the resource hypothesis is arguing that expressing gender differences can sometimes be a luxury. So there may be gender differences in preferences and valuations, but it's something that we can afford to express when we have already met certain other demands. So this can be a framework to understand why some gender differences may become more pronounced in high-income countries than in low-income countries, and this has been seen with some other behaviors and preferences, and it could potentially apply to the flexibility preference as well. So if the resource hypothesis is the one that is more true in this setting, we could have a situation where we observe women demanding and getting flexibility in a high income context, but not necessarily in a low and middle income framework or context. So what we do more precisely then, so we have an experimental design, and we sample from 4 agriculture cooperatives, and these are in 4 districts in rural Rwanda. It's Rubavu, Gatsibo, Kamonyi, and Nyanza. So we're covering, let me show you quickly. So we're covering different parts of Rwanda. So in these cooperatives, we invited 125 members plus their respective spouses. So in total, we invited across these 4 cooperatives 500 cooperative members and 500 spouses. So in the end, we had a total sample of about of 1,000 people, and we actually had very little attrition. So there were just a very few couples who did not participate in the whole study. So we conducted the lab in the field experiment with these 1,000 people, but then, and that was primarily, even though we asked some more qualitative questions, this was primarily what we would call quantitative data. But what we then had the opportunity to do, thanks to the funding we generously received, is that we could combine this with in-depth interviews. We didn't do those with all the 1,000 people, but with 256 members. So then we could really start shedding light on, okay, why are we seeing what we're seeing in the experiment? So this is our mixed methods that we're using, the quantitative experiment combined with these in-depth, semi-structured, and then transcribed interviews. Yeah, so this is the 4 cooperatives. We conducted 4 separate waves. So we started in August 2021 and ended in January 2022. And we did different waves because we wanted to be able to capture, if there would be any interesting variation across farming seasons, we wanted to be able to capture that. So for every wave, we conducted 10 sessions in each cooperative. And we had the same households coming back in all waves. And in the sessions, in the quantitative part, we wanted to assess willingness to pay for control over income. So and this many of you, I'm sure, have seen lots of this work before. So how much more are you willing to pay for controlling income, in the sense that the income goes to you directly rather than going to your spouse? So we measured willingness to pay for control over income. And then we also measured willingness to pay for freeing up time. So we were interested in this trade-off between control over income and control over time. And just shortly, the background for this is that many projects related to aid and development, they aim at increasing income, or increasing, say, women's control over income, but they rarely take into consideration that women are often the ones in the households who are already working the most. So the question is it always a good thing to increase opportunities for income? And to what extent do one have to think about what does this do to workload and time management? So we measured willingness to pay for freeing up time. I'll show you in a second how we did that, both paying for that out of your own payment and the spouse's payment. And that's also where we could measure demand for flexibility, because we varied whether or not it would be flexible in when to free up time. I'll show you more details in a moment. And we had ethical approval and so on to conduct this, of course. So when we wanted to measure how people value freeing up time, we had them make a series of choices between, on the one hand, simply money. As you can see, that money stayed the same throughout all the scenarios that participants were seeing. Or we offered them another opportunity, which was some money plus 1 day of labor. So basically, we, the experimenters, would hire a laborer who would come and help out and do whatever they were asked to help with. So we in this design, we were building on a paper by Agnes et al. That just came out this year. And as you can see, if you're focusing on one of these choices, if you choose between the same amount of money, but in one option you can also get a laborer who comes to help you, you will probably choose this free labor. But then as the money you receive go down compared to what you can get if you don't get the labor, then at some point you may shift and just go with the money. And that's how we get the valuation of this labor. And we then, since this labor can free up time for other tasks, we are then getting a measure of willingness to pay to free up time. And the flexibility part comes from, in some treatments, we said, okay, when exactly this labor is coming will be up to you. You can decide that it's flexible, whereas in the other case, in the other treatment, we just decided when that would be. So that was our quantitative measure of demand for flexibility. So what do we find then, just shortly? So this is willingness to pay for income control and to free up time. So we'll talk more about the flexibility in a moment, but just to show you quickly, we did see both women and men being willing to pay for control over income. We also varied in treatments whether we provided the income in cash or in kind, and we see that especially when we provide the income in cash, which is, and that's the type of income which is arguably in itself less controllable, then both women and men were willing to pay something to have control over that income rather than it going to the spouse. Women had a higher willingness to pay than for control over income than for men, which is something that has been seen in some other contexts. And we see that this correlates with autonomy in income, valuation of income control. So those are some of the results related to willingness to pay for income control. And then willingness to free up time. We saw a high valuation for freeing up time, but not really any gender differences. And we also didn't see flexibility mattering at all. So again, a different result in that sense than what we've seen in high income countries, where especially women really demand flexibility. We don't see that in this particular setting. So we saw when we were really looking closely at the data, we saw that there were some instances where we did see a gender difference. So for example, men who spend as much time as women on unpaid work, there we saw a gender difference with them being less willing to pay for free time than women. But in general, we saw, unlike for control over income, we saw in the willingness to pay for free up time, we saw very, very weak or no gender differences. And in general, we saw that flexibility is not really valued. So here, this graph shows women and men, and it shows mean willingness to pay on the y-axis. And we had treatments where we looked at when the laborer would come on a fixed day versus when the laborer would come on a flexible day. And as you can see, there is not even close to any type of significant difference, not between gender, but also not between the fixed and the flexible treatment. And this shows when it's payment to your spouse, and we see the same pattern when it's payment to you. So in sum, and before I hand over to Brenda, the quantitative results show us that, okay, what we see in high income countries with flexibility being valued more highly by women rather than by men, we don't really see that. But we can't say much as to why this is. But it turns out when we get to the qualitative data that Brenda will talk about, then we can really say much more as to the mechanisms. So I will stop sharing, and then I will hand over to Brenda, and she will continue.
Thank you so much, Johanna, for your nice presentation, for starting us off. Allow me a second to share the screen, and yes, and continue from where Johanna stopped us. Okay. Yes, we are there. Okay, I hope everyone is seeing the screen, and sorry.
Yeah, looks good. Yep.
Yeah, it looks good. Thank you. So the qualitative component complemented the quantitative component, and like Johanna has mentioned, was able to explain some of the aspects that were not able to be explained from the quantitative perspective. So we were able to dive in to conduct in-depth semi-structured interviews from July to August 2022. We had a team of researchers based in Rwanda, and I think we have the pleasure to have them in the presentation today. I can see Joseph, I can see Victor, Emrens is here, who did a great job collecting the data and also coding. We use the web-based Atlas BI software.
Brenda,
yes, please.
I think the slides may be stuck on the wrong slide.
Oh.
Because yeah, so if you try starting the presentation again.
Okay.
Share again, because we were seeing the wrong slide.
Oh no, sorry.
Yes, if you do
able to
slideshow
see?
again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
now
perfect.
it's the right
Okay,
one.
yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. We did we did code the data, the same team, using the web-based Atlas TI software, and we were using the same code book where each member was able to update the emerging codes coming out of the data, and then all the members agreeing to particular emerging codes and assigning or labeling the content or the findings that we were analyzing, and then we had to check in every 2 days to harmonize and proceed with the process. So the web-based software was very helpful for team-based analysis, and of course we drew on the thematic comparative analysis, considering the gender parameter, the economic status using Obudehe, which is a kind of the wealth categories that was then in Rwanda, which has a little bit shifted, but it gives us a clue on how people really associated themselves, some of the findings, education, and age. But also in terms of education, most of the participants had either primary education or below. So the comparison was not very really outstanding in terms of comparing with the advanced level accomplishments, which were very, very limited. And yeah, and then this was like the first part of the coding. We had another level or layer of coding where we had like 5 broad themes structured around the level of control over income, valuation of control over income, control over time, valuation of freeing up time, but also valuation of labor flexibility. And we were able to go again. So we had like 2 layers of coding, general coding and identification of key ideas, but there's also having these 5 broad themes that we went into code the data against, and we kind of had a scale of 1 to 4, from 1 being the least and then 4 being the most in terms of evaluation of these aspects and levels. So this allowed us to come up with kind of really concrete data for qualitative. We were also able to subject the data to semi-quantitative analysis to be able to get some levels. For instance, on the left, you can see and the evaluation in figures of values, which show us that there was no gender difference in the level of control over income. For instance, the blue is for women, the red is for men, and this is what actually the experiment was also indicating, the field experiment that Johanna has just explained. And we see significant gender differences in valuation of control over income. This is quite different from the quantitative findings, and which the lab in field experiment did not pick up, where actually, the women valued control of income, compared to the men. So when we subjected further analysis to the narrative, we found that actually financial progress was found to be very important for the women and men of different, social categories: the youth, the older women, the older men, and the middle-aged of those groups across the different wealth categories. And increased household income was most valued, and men acknowledged in terms of management of these resources that actually women were better at management of family income and family resources because they thought or they perceived themselves to be, extravagant in terms of expenditure. They said, okay, we can't pass by a social place and we are not able to spend maybe on some of the entertainment services, help, giving out to friends. And they said compared to the women, if the resources are, reserved for the family well-being, then they would most likely spend on those particular items. So they said, in terms of management, we trust the women more than we do ourselves of income, for instance. And so in terms of control of income, the men had less trust with them, of themselves, which was very interesting. And there was preference for joint decisions over income. They said, okay, women can actually manage this money, but when it comes to decisions over these resources, we need to be on the table, all of us. And the same was from women. The women were like, yeah, we need joint decision making, although there were gender differences in terms of the reasons given, men giving the issue of maybe possibilities of overspending these resources, and also mentioning family unity and partnership. But women talked more in terms of trust, in terms of, strengthening marriage or marital relations, but also in terms of religious and cultural beliefs that they attributed to this jointness. And the details, when we dug deep into the details, actually, eventually men said, okay, but if there are big things, big decisions to make for the family in terms of, for instance, land or buying livestock, or then kind of they override the decision. So it was an interesting conversation when we dug deep into these findings. So the joint decision making is preferred, it is desired, but in actual practice, women may contribute, but the final decision is mainly with the men. And there were a lot of strategic calculations from the narratives that shape these relations in terms of control over income, the extent, but how it unfolds, like I've mentioned. In terms of freeing up time, the figure shows from the, generated from the qualitative findings, which Johanna has mentioned. There are 200 plus, around 250 something. So we were able to really see the summary, big picture of this with the software. And men presented slightly higher levels of control over their time
Brenda?
use. Yes,
Sorry,
please.
Brenda, your slide is still with the level of income and control and valuation.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. So I
Okay.
think maybe Johanna can help me share the screen. Sorry about that.
No worries. Did that
Johanna,
work, Johanna?
yes. Okay, I'll stop sharing. I'll stop sharing. Yes.
So where do you want it to be?
Oh, yeah. Next, please. Yes, I'd like it there. I just mentioned that men have a slightly higher level of control over their time use than the women, as we can see on the left of the figure. But then women have a significantly higher valuation, the same as the previous in terms of level, or of control over income, but also valuation. So we consistently see that actually women are valuing more of control, they are valuing more freeing up time compared to the men. And yeah, the lab in the field experiment again showed no significant difference, which again qualitative findings were able to pick up. Yeah, next, Johanna, please. Okay. A deeper dive into the analysis also showed us that both men and women expressed having limited time to rest which was interesting because we thought women, we had, sometimes thinking, okay, women might be more burdened than the men, as some of the literature indicates, in terms of the different culture context in Africa. But then men consistently mentioned that they're actually equally burdened by work. And this was mainly from the middle-aged men, the youth, and the most poor categories of both men and women. And somehow there was also a narrative when we probed where people, the men mentioned, okay, we are burdened, but compared to our spouses, they are more burdened, or even the girls, but they expressed a lot of these work burdens, especially the domestic work in the garden, in the even childcare. They mentioned that they were actually taking care of the children. And we had a long discussion as a research team about this. Both men and women also allied. We had statements that we crafted in form of a game. So we asked people to select the options that they aligned to in our tool. So most of them mentioned, both men and women of different categories, that higher income progress was more important than the workload alleviation, showing high willingness to overwork in the hope of attaining high economic returns, but also showing that, aligning with these other statements that, I have more agricultural work to do and I earn more money. Higher income progress is more important than workload alleviation, like I mentioned. So this all combined show us the willingness to work, the willingness to earn higher incomes, but also the willingness to alleviate poverty compared to workload alleviation, and also freeing up time and the flexibility that Johanna has already mentioned. So I'll continue to the next. Yes. So mainly women talked about prioritization of basic needs, especially children's school fees, better food and nutrition, having family harmony and all that, overpayments for hired labor and reduced workloads, and really which were viewed to be fundamental services, essential basic services that they needed at the moment in time when we did the study, and hopefully up to now, compared to them thinking about alleviating the workloads. Women placed higher value on time saving than men because of the health, due to health. When they mentioned time saving, they also said, okay, it's good, especially for health caregiving purposes because of the workloads. But still, they said financial progress and high income progress and achievements were better. And they also alluded to the importance of technology, if possible, that could reduce their labor burdens. Yeah. So yeah, there was that balance, working more, but also reducing workloads for some, and especially from the women's point of view. And the next one, Johanna, please. Okay. Finally, on this slide, the qualitative findings of flexibility. Again, we see women valuing labor flexibility significantly more than the men. So the differences are consistent across these themes that we were deeply exploring, which the labbing experiment and the quantitative surveys completely did not show. And this matches the findings from developed countries as well, like Johanna mentioned, that women not only desire it, but also demand for it. So there is a kind of similarity of women in Rwanda, compared to women in other developed contexts in terms of the need for flexibility. the only difference is the prioritization in terms of women's economic situation, for instance, in Rwanda and the developed countries. Yeah. Next one, Johanna. Okay, and this wraps it up in terms of the quotations when we ask them to actually rate 1 to 4 in terms of their what they thought about flexibility. Definitely better if it is less flexible, somewhat better, somewhat better if it's more flexible but doesn't matter that much. But then number 4, definitely better if it is more flexible. I think this received overwhelming support and enabled us to gauge the positive, attitudes to flexibility by both men and women. There were no gender differences in this, but the emphasis again came back to the economic challenges, and said, this is good, this is very important for us, but the economics, the poverty alleviation is most important for now. Next, Johanna. And these are some of the quotations. Someone saying, for instance, we work hard in order to progress instead of resting too much. Too much rest is useless. Someone said, we work hard and need to earn money. So this is from the different age groups, the middle-aged men, the youth, women and men. And this is just for illustrating what I've already mentioned. And it cut across the age groups, but also the socioeconomic categories. Next one. Yeah, the next one is a conclusion. We note that actually, mixed methods provides a holistic perspective. Using quantitative and qualitative methods was very helpful to interact with this data and to be able to find nuances that were not able to be found, for instance, in quantitative, which were found in the qualitative, but also having the different layers of the qualitative analysis, where we started deep and later went broad with those different levels that were subjected to further precise analysis. Gender and other socioeconomic demographics shape preferences and trade-offs, but also we see income security dominating. Both men and women value workload reduction. There are no, much contrast, but then they prioritize this due to income loss that might come with this. Yeah, but then women value time saving and flexibility more than the men, as demonstrated by the findings. And this shows that really poverty constrains choices for time flexibility, workloads, and this points us to be in line with what the resource hypothesis actually predicts. And our findings contrast with high-income countries where women do not only value flexibility more, but strongly demand it. So this is just a comparison that we are trying to put out there. And the last one, we have some policy implications. Yes, that it's very important to think about context-specific evidence. Rethinking flexibility must also account for socioeconomic constraints, but also other factors. Poverty overrides flexibility preferences. At least in the context of Rwanda, but also gender norms, we can't write them off. Gender norms still influence trade-offs. And, we think bundling work flexibility and income security interventions in rural and poor contexts might be very helpful, especially in the face of women empowerment and gender equality programs, but also, other realities that are coming up, especially affecting women, like climate change and other changes in the rural livelihoods. And yeah, no one size fits all. And real labor policies definitely should avoid assuming global patterns to be fit for all. So that is all we had for us. Over to you, Ara.
All right. Thank you so much. This is a really interesting study. Thank you for the presentations, both Johanna and Brenda. And before I open it up to the floor for questions, just feel free to drop any links to the other publications from the project for those who want to learn more about it. I think that it would be really interesting to see more results coming out of the study earlier. Okay, so any questions? I do not see anything in the chat yet. Hazel. Are you muted? Hazel? Yeah.
Hello, is that working now?
Yes. Yep.
Sorry. Yeah,
No worries.
it takes forever to unmute. So thank you so much. This is super interesting. I had like a few comments around the actual methodology and the sequence. So when you talked about having 10 sessions, did you have any issues around attrition and how and if not, how was that managed? Because I think sometimes that's a concern when people are kind of trying to implement any method where you have to come back and reach out to the same people repeatedly. So that's one. The other question I had was just around, and I may have missed it sort of in when you're describing the qualitative method, but what was the timing in terms of when you went back for the to do the in-depth interviews compared to the actual experiment? So just clarifying questions there.
Yeah, so in terms of the attrition, there was basically no attrition issues at all, which was super surprising to me because I've never done an experiment where people have been asked to come back where that has not been a problem. So basically, I think there was one or two couples that did not participate throughout. So I guess it was what I know is that it seems to have been worthwhile in terms of monetary compensation and so on. It was probably also easy to get there and so on, but I'm sure at Berber or Emirates have more in-depth answers to that. In terms of the timing of the interviews, that was quite a long time later, so it was almost a year, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I
But
think it
maybe
was about
Emirates
half a
or
year.
yeah.
Yeah, so there was some time in between, sort of, as the funding needed to be confirmed, thanks to the gender platform, though, that we were able to do this. And then also the tools needed to be developed, and we put a lot of effort into developing the qualitative research tools. And also we already had a coding framework in place before we went into the field because we wanted to make sure that we were collecting the data that was needed. So yeah, a lot of effort went into designing those qualitative research instruments, which is why there was a gap between the last round of the lab in a field experiment and the qualitative work. But even from the last round of the lab in a field experiment to the qualitative work, it was quite easy to find the right households. Just because of I think their strong connection with the cooperatives, and they had really also valued the project. And I think that's an answer to the attrition part as well. They had actually really valued the sort of the laborers that we were arranging for them. That was really filling a gap for them, and it was really valued. And so, for instance, people who ended up receiving by chance the payout from the task for control over income, where they received just money, they were like, oh, I had hoped that the labor task had been selected for payment because I wanted the laborer. So I think definitely the types of incentives in this experiment made people come back as well.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
thank you. We have another question in the chat from Huiying. She said, does this study include family members as helpers, or is it only based on individual labors of either side of the couples? Do daughters help unpaid more?
So in terms of the laborers we hired, those were never family members. And I'm sure there are other there may be children, depending on what age they are, who are helping. But we interviewed the spouses. I think we did have, I mean, we had questions about how old children were and kind of how plots were generally managed. So we could probably have some information there, but they were never paid as part of the experiment.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question? I had a quick clarifying questions. Maybe you have mentioned this at the beginning when you're explaining the methodology. Is the study population, they're all rural households, or is it kind of mix of rural and urban? I mean, are they all in agriculture, farming, or I was just thinking
They're
like,
all corporate, they're all farming cooperatives, so
okay,
it's rural.
all right.
Yeah.
Maybe to clarify that the help or the laborers that we hired for them, that was to work on their fields. So the cooperatives have the marshlands, which is where some of the most sort of profitable production is taking place. And so they received through the experiment, if they hired the laborers, then the laborers would come help on their marshlands. So that's how it was constructed.
But yeah, and thank you, Berber. When I said that the labor would do whatever they wanted help with, that is like whatever was needed on the plot of land with the plot management at that moment. So it could be like depending on which farming season and so on, they could direct the laborer to what needed to be done.
Any other questions or comments?
There's no more questions, then maybe I can sort of say a few words. We're in the process of writing up the paper. We are really interested in your feedback. So if you have any, responses, if it needs to sink in, and after the webinar, you have any suggestions sort of in terms of the narrative and us linking this with the social role hypothesis versus the resource hypothesis. And, if the evidence that we're presenting, if you indeed agree with us that this is pointing at the resource hypothesis guiding those preferences, if you have any feedback on that or anything that you say, okay, keep this into account, please let us know. Since, we'll be writing up the paper and hoping to get it published somewhere in the near future. So any comments, welcome. And this was the first time for us to present this. So thank you all.
Thank you. I was actually, Berber, you read my mind. I was going to ask you about the next steps about the project and the
Put it on
papers.
paper.
Yep.
Paper. Yes.
Cool. I guess everything was clear. No questions. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can finish early. I really just wanted to.
Question.
Oh yes, please go ahead.
I wanted to know for the qualitative data, when the respondents speak of valuing their time more than the flexibility or vice versa. Exactly what is it that they were talking about? Are there any quotations to give us a picture of what they were saying? If any. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the question. I think valuing their money, like ability to make the money compared to the freeing up time, was mainly due to the economic challenges at the household level. But they did not disagree. They did not disagree that freeing up time is not good, like we saw in the in the quantitative and qualitative findings. So much as they agree that it is important to free up time, but also to have some time flexibility, they thought they were not ready for that at the moment because of the other economic challenges that they are facing currently. As Rwandese households, they are more bothered about the poverty. They are more bothered about the well-being of their families in terms of livelihoods, meaning that they want to use any time available for themselves, either as spouses, like man and woman, to make as much income improvements as possible. And I think I should also clarify that this is coming in. It's not very surprising in the context of Rwanda because the social political narrative is around economic transformation and social reorganization. For instance, Rwanda has positioned itself as a gender equality country, like coming up like somehow the fifth in the world. So gender equality is something that they promote. So already people are very much attuned to that, although of course there are still challenges, but also in terms of the economic capacities that are being built, Rwanda is trying to transition as fast as possible to be a middle income country by 2035. So it's kind of fits into the broader narrative, the government, institutions, and leadership, and the structures, economic structures in place that are also building up the momentum. I think I could tie that to that kind of conversation as well. I don't know whether I'm clearer, but there are a lot of quotations and also estimations with the graphs that we showed about the levels, but also valuations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final question or comments? Okay, then I'd like to really thank Johanna and Brenda for their excellent presentations, and thanks, Berber. And thanks everyone for your time. We will host another webinar next month, September 18th, and we'll send out an invitation soon. So please stay tuned. And thank you again, everyone, for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Thank
Bye.
you, Johanna, Brenda.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.